It was a bright Tuesday afternoon when I walked into the living room and caught him. Lagos was its usual busy self outside. Honking cars, street vendors shouting out their wares, and the smell of jollof rice and fried plantain wafting through the open window. But inside my home, my world was about to shatter. I was tired, yes, but that wasn't why my heart felt like it was suddenly being squeezed in a vice. I had always suspected something was off. The late nights, the sudden coldness. But when I saw her, that woman, sitting on our couch, laughing as if the space between us didn't matter, something inside me snapped. I didn't even know how to react at first. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part just wanted to walk away. But my legs wouldn't let me move. I stood there, frozen, watching the scene unfold like it wasn't my life. Shinonso, my husband, didn't even look at me. He kept his eyes glued to his phone, his face so indifferent that it cut deeper than any words ever could. The woman beside him, she had the nerve to smile at me as if we were old friends. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Shinonso didn't answer. He just glanced at me before looking away again. That was all the confirmation I needed. That was the moment I realized I had been married to a man who wasn't just cheating on me, but also keeping secrets that would ruin everything I thought I knew about him. The house felt suffocating, like the air had suddenly become too thick to breathe. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I wanted to ask him, "How could you?" But I couldn't get the words out. The betrayal was choking me. You, I finally managed to stutter, the words getting stuck in my throat. "Who is she?" But before he could speak, the woman interrupted. "I'm his wife," she said. "Didn't you know?" I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hands started to shake. The room spun around me. This wasn't supposed to be my life. Not like this. I had worked hard. I had sacrificed so much. And here he was, flaunting it all right in front of me. Then he spoke. His words cut me like a knife. "She's not the only one," Shinonso said, his voice cold. "I don't want you anymore. I never did." I stood there in disbelief. The tears burned in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. I had no idea how long I stood there. Minutes? Hours? Felt like an eternity. In that moment, I realized that everything I had ever believed in was a lie. The man I had loved, the father of my children, was a stranger. A stranger who had just shattered my heart. But as I turned to walk away, something in me shifted. I wasn't about to let him get away with this. I had been silent for too long. The shock was settling in, but I was also angry. Angry at the way he had humiliated me. Angry at the betrayal. I would get my revenge. But for now, I had to hold it together. I had to keep my head straight. I wasn't leaving here without answers. Welcome to Stories by Anif. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and anger. I barely slept, barely ate. Each moment felt like a betrayal on top of another, each one heavier than the last. Shinonso stayed out late as usual. The woman from the living room, her name was Nkechi, started calling the house more frequently. I knew because I could hear the conversation, muffled through the walls, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone. The kids, our triplets, Chidi, Ifioma, and Ikenna, asked me why Daddy wasn't home anymore. They didn't understand. They didn't know. And I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Every day, I put on a brave face, but it was getting harder. My friends would call, asking if everything was okay, and I would lie. I was pretending like everything was fine, but inside, I was dying. I kept thinking about what she said in the living room. I'm his wife. Did Shinonso really marry someone else? Was everything a lie? Did he ever truly love me? I had to get answers. One evening, after I put the kids to bed, I sat down with my phone in hand, staring at it. I wasn't sure how to start, but I knew I had to do something. I sent him a message, "We need to talk." It didn't take long for him to reply. His message was cold, distant, just like the man I had married. "What's there to talk about? You already know the truth." My heart sank. The truth? What truth? Was I living in some twisted nightmare? I needed to confront him. I needed to see him face to face. The next day, I drove to his office. I was nervous, my palms sweaty on the steering wheel, but I had to do this. I had to know. As I walked into his office, his assistant looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. She probably had. Shinonso and I hadn't spoken in weeks, and it was clear something was wrong. When Shinonso saw me, he didn't stand up. He didn't even look up from his desk. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was clenched. "Shinonso, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm. He finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "About what?" "About you. About everything. About why you've been acting like a stranger. About why you're married to Nkechi." I could feel the anger rising in me, but I pushed it down. I had to stay calm. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You don't get it, do you?" "Get what?" I snapped. "You're married to another woman, and you're telling me I don't get it?" "No," he stood up then, walking around the desk, his voice growing more impatient. "You don't get it. I didn't want to hurt you, but I had to. I couldn't keep up with the lies anymore. I didn't want to be trapped." The words hit me like a slap to the face. "Trapped?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Trapped in what, Shinonso?" He paused, staring at me with a look of exhaustion. In this life we built together. You have no idea what it's like, having to pretend to be someone I'm not, having to keep up with your expectations, your family's expectations." I couldn't do it anymore. I was speechless. Was he really blaming me for this? For his lies? For his betrayal? "You don't even know who I really am," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been pretending for so long." I stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. "Who are you, then?" He looked at me for a long moment, then something shifted in his eyes. "I'm not poor, Ifioma. I'm not the man you think I am. I'm a billionaire. I've been pretending to be poor, pretending to struggle, just so I could keep you around." His words hit me like a bombshell, knocking the air out of me. "You're what?" "I've been hiding it all this time," he said. "But now it's all falling apart." I was stunned. A billionaire? Shinonso, my husband, the man I had married in the hope of building a simple life, was pretending to be poor? Why would he do that? I could barely comprehend what he was saying, but one thing was clear. Everything I knew about him was a lie. "I don't know who you are anymore," I whispered, my voice breaking. Shinonso ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "You don't have to understand, but I need you to know the truth. I never wanted this life for you, for me, for us." I stared at him, trying to process the words that were coming out of his mouth. A billionaire? Pretending to be poor? What kind of person does that? I stood there, frozen. My whole world was unraveling, piece by piece, and I couldn't stop it. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't done yet. This betrayal was only the beginning. I had a plan, and I would make him regret ever underestimating me. Days passed, but my mind was still spinning from the truth Shinonso had revealed. A billionaire? Pretending to be poor? It made no sense. Why would he do something like that? Why go to such lengths to deceive me, to deceive everyone? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had to know more. There had to be something more to this story. Shinonso had barely given me any answers, just a few cryptic words that left me with more questions than ever. I was determined to get those answers. I started by going through his things. His office, his computer, the drawer where he kept his important documents. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed something, anything, that would help me understand why my entire life had been turned upside down. It didn't take long before I found the first clue. There, tucked inside a folder, was a contract. A business deal. It wasn't just any business deal, it was a multimillion-dollar contract. The kind of contract that would make anyone wealthy for life. And it was signed by Shinonso. I stared at the document, my hands shaking. I was angry, yes, but there was something else. Something deeper. Betrayal, sure. But also confusion. How could I have been so blind? How could I have spent years with this man, thinking we were struggling together, only for him to be living in luxury? I knew I needed to confront him again. But this time I was armed with evidence. I wasn't just going to sit back and take his excuses. I deserved more than that. I deserved the truth. The next day, I waited for him to come home. The kids were at school, and I knew this would be the only time I'd have to confront him without any distractions. When Shinonso finally walked through the door, I was already waiting for him. My heart was racing, but I didn't let him see that. I had to stay calm. I had to be strong. "You need to explain this to me," I said, holding up the contract. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Fear? He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, his face betraying nothing. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice cold. I threw the contract down on the table in front of him. "Don't lie to me, Shinonso. I know what this is. I know about the business. I know about the money. Why did you lie to me? Why did you hide this from me?" His face went pale. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to move or speak. But then he took a deep breath and sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "I didn't want you to know," he finally said. "I didn't want you to think that I married you for your money. I didn't want anyone to think I was using you. But you were using me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "For years, you pretended to be something you're not. You used me. You used our family. And for what?" Shinonso ran a hand through his hair, looking torn. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant for it to get so complicated. I never meant for you to find out like this. I don't care about your excuses," I said, my anger rising. "You've lied to me for so long, Shinonso. I don't know who you are anymore. You're not the man I married." He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought if I kept the money a secret, we could live a simple life. But it didn't work out that way. Everything spiraled out of control." I didn't know what to say to him. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw the contract in his face and walk out. But another part of me felt sad. Sad for the man he had become, and sad for the family we had built that was now falling apart. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," I said quietly. Shinonso nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. "I know. I've ruined everything. But please, Ifioma, understand that I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I thought it was the only way I could protect you. Protect our children. Couldn't help it." The tears came then, despite my best efforts to hold them back. "You should have trusted me, Shinonso. You should have trusted us." He reached out to me then, but I pulled back. Couldn't let him touch me. Not after everything he had done. "I can't be the woman you wanted me to be," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't pretend that everything is okay when it's not." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But his apology wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There was too much hurt, too much damage, too many lies. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this without facing the consequences. The anger inside me grew. I wasn't just going to stand there and take it. I had a plan now, and I was going to make sure Shinonso understood that his betrayal wasn't going unpunished. I had to make him regret ever thinking he could get away with this. The next few days were a blur. The house felt colder, emptier. Shinonso and I barely spoke, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. The kids noticed, of course. They didn't understand what was happening, but they could sense that something was wrong. Every time they asked about their father, I had to bite back the tears. It was clear to me now, our marriage was a facade, a well-maintained lie, and it wasn't just Shinonso's fault. I had been blinded by the same lie for so long. We both had, and now it was crumbling before our eyes. But I wasn't going to let it crumble in silence. That night, as the moon cast long shadows across the city, I sat in the living room, staring at my phone. I hadn't made any decisions yet. I didn't know what my next move would be. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let Shinonso off the hook. Not this time. My fingers hovered over the screen. I thought about calling him, about confronting him one last time. But that wasn't enough anymore. I needed something bigger, something that would make him pay. I needed to take control of this situation, to show him that I wasn't the weak woman he thought I was. I had heard rumors about Shinonso's business dealings, about the empire he had built while pretending to be poor. There were whispers about offshore accounts, secret investments, properties hidden in plain sight. I didn't know how much of it was true, but I was determined to find out. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I would go after everything he had. The money, the business, the power. If he thought he could keep me in the dark, I was going to drag his secrets into the light. I wasn't going to just sit back and cry over the man I thought I knew. I was going to make sure he regretted every single moment of his deception. But I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I called my older brother, Chijiok. He was the type of man who could find anything out, no matter how well hidden it was. He had connections. He had the resources. And, most importantly, he was the kind of person who knew how to deal with men like Shinonso. When I explained the situation to him, there was no hesitation in his voice. "I'll take care of it, Ifioma," he said. "You just leave it to me." I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I wasn't alone in this anymore. I had someone on my side, someone who understood what I was going through. Over the next few days, Chijiok got to work. He made phone calls, visited people who knew Shinonso's business dealings, and dug into his financials. Meanwhile, I focused on the kids, doing my best to keep up the appearance of normalcy. But inside, I was bubbling with anger, waiting for the moment when everything would explode. Then, one night, Chijiok called me. "I have something," he said, his voice low. "You're not going to like it." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "There's more to Shinonso's empire than you know," he continued. "Much more. He's not just pretending to be poor. He's been involved in illegal dealings, things that go way beyond what you've seen. He's been hiding assets, making deals under the table." I felt my stomach drop. "How much are we talking about?" "A lot," Chijiok said. "Enough to bring him down. Enough to ruin him." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was relieved that there was something I could use against him. But another part of me felt sick. How could I have been married to a man capable of such deception? How could I have been so blind? "I want to make sure this is done right," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't want to just hurt him. I want him to feel the weight of everything he's done. I want him to understand the damage he's caused." "You will," Chijiok reassured me. "I'll make sure of it." I hung up the phone, my mind spinning. It wasn't just the betrayal anymore. It was the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for everything we had built together. Shinonso thought he could hide behind his wealth, behind his power. But now he was about to face the consequences. As I sat there in the quiet of my living room, I knew one thing for sure. The calm was over. The storm was coming. And it was going to be a storm unlike anything Shinonso had ever faced. I was ready for it. I had nothing left to lose. The days following my conversation with Chijiok were a mix of waiting and planning. I couldn't help but feel the pressure mounting. Every time I looked at Shinonso, I saw a stranger, a man who had betrayed me, who had built a life of lies while I was left in the dark. The anger was growing inside me, but I had to be patient. I had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Chijioke was working tirelessly behind the scenes. He had dug up more than I had ever expected. He uncovered financial records, shady offshore accounts, and properties linked to Shinanso that I had never even known about. The more he found, the clearer it became. Shinanso's empire wasn't built on hard work or good business practices. It was built on deceit, lies, and manipulation. I sat on this information like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to bring everything crashing down. Meanwhile, Shinanso continued with his cold indifference, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. He came home late every night, as usual, his eyes glued to his phone, texting Kechi, I assumed. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was only to make empty excuses about work. He never once asked about the kids or how I was doing. He didn't care. I was done pretending, done playing the wife in this charade. One evening, after another silent dinner where Shinanso barely looked up from his plate, I decided it was time to confront him once more. This time I had something he couldn't ignore. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady but firm. He looked up, his eyes narrowed in irritation. About what? About everything? I replied, my heart racing in my chest. About you, about the lies, about the business, about everything you've been hiding from me. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes flickering toward the door as if considering walking out. But I wasn't going to let him. Not this time. You've lied to me for so long, Shinanso, I continued. You've lied about who you are, about what you've been doing, and you've put me and our children in the middle of it. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've told you everything. No, you haven't, I shot back. I know about the business. I know about the money. I know about the offshore accounts, the properties, the lies you've been living, and now it's time for you to face the consequences. His face went pale. I could see the shock in his eyes, but he quickly recovered, trying to mask his fear with a facade of calm. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, his voice shaky. You've got it all wrong. But I wasn't backing down. Don't lie to me, Shinanso. I have all the proof I need. You think you can keep hiding behind your money, but I'm done with it. I'm done with you. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising in frustration. I had to do this. I had to keep the money hidden. I didn't want you to think I was using you for your wealth. I didn't want anyone to know who I really am. I stepped closer, my fists clenched at my sides. No, Shinanso, you didn't want anyone to know who you really are because you were too busy lying to everyone around you. You didn't care about me. You didn't care about us. You only cared about your own selfish, twisted need for control. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and guilt. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why did you? I demanded, my voice breaking. Why did you betray me like this? Why did you tear our family apart for the sake of your ego? I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, his voice softening. I was just trying to protect you, protect us. But you didn't protect us, Shinanso. You destroyed us. You destroyed everything. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. I'm done with your excuses. I'm done with your lies. You're going to face the consequences of everything you've done. And I won't stop until you do. Shinanso stood there in silence for a moment, his face pale and his eyes filled with regret. But it was too late for regret. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. You think you can take everything from me? He asked, his voice low and threatening. You think you can just ruin my life without consequences? I stood my ground, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm not the one who ruined it, Shinanso. You did that all by yourself. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a moment, my body trembling with a mix of anger and relief. The confrontation was only the beginning, but it was a necessary step. Now it was time for the next phase. I had everything I needed to bring Shinonso to his knees, and I wasn't going to stop until I saw justice. I knew he wasn't going to let this go easily. He was going to fight back. But I was ready. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking control of my life. It was about reclaiming everything he had stolen from me. The trap was set. Now it was time to watch him fall into it. The days after my confrontation with Shinonso were a whirlwind of emotions. I had never felt so powerless and yet so powerful at the same time. The anger still burned within me, but now it was mixed with something else. Determination. Shinonso had betrayed me, but I wasn't going to let him walk away from this unscathed. Not anymore. Chijioke had been working tirelessly behind the scenes, and he had come through in ways I never imagined. The documents, the hidden assets, everything was laid out in front of me, a clear path to bringing Shinonso down. But I couldn't stop wondering, how had he gotten this far? How had he managed to live this lie for so long without anyone catching on? It didn't matter now. I had the power to expose him, and I wasn't going to hesitate. One evening, as I sat in the living room going over the documents Chijioke had gathered, my phone rang. It was Shinonso. I almost didn't answer, but then I remembered the coldness in his voice when he left that night. I couldn't let him think he had control over me anymore. I picked up. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady, but there was a sharp edge to it that I couldn't hide. "I'm sorry, Ifeoma," Shinonso said, his voice softer than usual. "I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know how to fix it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Where was this remorse when it mattered? Where was this apology when it could have saved everything? "It's too late for apologies, Shinonso," I replied. "You've done too much damage. I can't just forget about what you've done." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but please, just give me a chance to explain." I was silent for a moment, trying to process his words. What did he expect from me now? Did he think I was going to just fall back into his arms because he said he was sorry? Couldn't. "You've had your chance," I finally said, my voice cold. "You've had years to explain, and you didn't. You kept your secrets. You kept lying to me. You don't get to play the victim now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought he was going to hang up, but then he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. "I'm not playing the victim, Ifeoma," he said. "I'm just trying to make things right." "By what? Lying some more?" I spat. "I've had enough of your lies, Shinonso. I've had enough." "I know," he said, and there was a heavy sigh on the other end. "I messed up, and now it's too late. But please, for the sake of our children, don't bring the kids into this," I interrupted sharply. "You're the one who messed up. You're the one who broke this family, not me." There was another long silence. I could almost hear the regret in his breath. He knew what was coming. He knew it couldn't be fixed with a few words. "I'm going to take everything from you," I said, my voice low but steady. "You think you can hide behind your money and your lies, but I'm going to expose you for who you really are. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done." "Ifeoma, don't do this," he pleaded. "Please, don't do this to me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had made up my mind. The damage he had caused wasn't just about the betrayal. It wasn't just about the lies. It was about the years he had stolen from me, the trust he had shattered. I was done. The next day, I met with my lawyer, ready to move forward. I wasn't just going to file for divorce. That wasn't enough. I was going to take everything he had worked so hard to hide, the properties, the money, the assets. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. He had thought he could play me for a fool, but I was done being the victim. As I sat in the lawyer's office, reviewing the paperwork, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led up to this moment. The good times, the bad times, the lies, the secrets. Shinonso had built an empire of deceit, and now I was going to tear it all down. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about taking back what was mine. My life, my dignity, my children's future. Later that night, after I signed the papers, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the blank walls. The house felt emptier than ever, but I knew something had shifted. I had taken control. The trap was set. Now, Shinonso was about to face the consequences of his actions. But little did I know he was already plotting his next move. I didn't hear from Shinonso for the next few days. I wasn't sure what to expect. Part of me thought he'd try to beg for forgiveness again, maybe even attempt to make some half-hearted plea. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. The woman who had blindly forgiven. The woman who had hoped for change. That woman was gone. What I didn't expect, though, was the news that came through the door one Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished making lunch for the kids when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before going to open it. When I saw the envelope in the mailman's hand, I felt a sudden, uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. The envelope had Shinonso's name on it, but it wasn't from him. It was from his lawyer. I opened it with trembling hands, and as I read the contents, my heart sank. It was a legal notice, a threat to take our children from me. Shinonso had filed for full custody of the kids. He claimed I was unstable and emotionally unfit to care for them, citing the emotional stress of the divorce and the strain it had placed on our family. He said that the kids deserved better, that they deserved stability. He even had the audacity to mention that he was financially equipped to provide them with a better future. I couldn't believe what I was reading. He was using the one thing I loved most in this world, my children, to try and manipulate me, to try and control me. I felt the weight of the betrayal all over again. He wasn't just trying to tear our marriage apart. He was trying to tear apart the one thing I had left to hold on to, my children. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter clutched in my hands, the world spinning around me. It was hard to breathe. I had fought so hard for our family, for our life, for our love. But now it was clear. Shinonso was willing to fight dirty. He was willing to use everything, even the children we had both loved, as pawns in his game. Couldn't let him win. Not like this. I immediately called Chijioke, who was already dealing with the financial side of things. Couldn't waste time. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. "I got it," Chijioke said when I explained the situation. "This is his move, Ifeoma. But it won't work. We'll fight this. We'll show the court who he really is." I nodded, even though the fear was eating away at me. What if I lost them? What if Shinonso succeeded in turning them against me? I couldn't let that happen. But I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight. Shinonso had money. He had connections. He was powerful. But I had something he didn't, the truth. And no amount of money could change that. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and frantic phone calls. Every time I saw the kids, their innocent smiles, their laughter, it reminded me why I had to keep going. I couldn't let Shinonso win. Not when they needed me. I kept my emotions in check, but inside, I was seething with rage. I had never imagined that Shinonso would go this far. But now that I knew the stakes, there was no turning back. I was going to fight for my children. I was going to fight for everything I had left. And I wasn't going to stop until I saw Shinonso face the consequences of his actions. The custody battle was just the beginning. As I prepared for the long, ugly fight ahead, I received another surprise. This one came in the form of a phone call. It was from Kechi. I didn't answer it at first. After everything that had happened, I had no interest in speaking to the woman who had played a part in destroying my family. But she kept calling, again and again. Finally, out of curiosity and maybe a bit of caution, I picked up. "Ifeoma, we need to talk," she said, her voice strained. "Please." I could hear the desperation in her voice. Something was off, and I didn't trust her. But I agreed to meet her, hoping it would give me more insight into Shinonso's world. We met at a cafe in the city. She was wearing a black dress, her eyes tired but determined. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She just motioned for me to sit down. "I don't know where to start," she began, her voice shaky. "I never wanted any of this to happen." I raised an eyebrow. "You never wanted this? You were the one in my house, sitting on my couch, acting like you had a right to be there." "I know," she said, her eyes downcast. "But Shinonso, he's not who you think he is. He's not a good man. He's manipulative. He's controlling. He's not who he portrays himself to be." My heart started racing. Was she about to admit that she knew more about his dark side than I did? "Tell me everything," I said, my voice cold. "Tell me what you know." She looked around nervously before speaking again, this time quieter. "He's been hiding so many things from you. I don't even know where to begin. But he's not just pretending to be poor. He's been involved in things you wouldn't believe." My pulse quickened. What was she saying? "He's dangerous, Ifeoma. He's not just a businessman. He's something far worse." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" "I can't say much right now," she whispered, her eyes darting around. "But if you keep pushing him, keep going after his empire, you might not just be fighting him. You'll be fighting the people he's involved with. People who don't play by the rules." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just about a cheating husband anymore. This was about something much darker, much more dangerous. And I was in the middle of it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think happens next? Comment below. The news from Kechi hit me harder than I expected. I had suspected that Shinonso wasn't just a simple businessman with a secret life. But the way she spoke made it clear that I was dealing with something far beyond a messy divorce and a broken marriage. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a warning. I had to decide quickly if I was willing to keep pushing for justice, knowing that it could cost me more than I was ready to pay. I sat in silence for a moment after our conversation, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? I'd always thought of Shinonso as a man who was just trying to maintain some level of control over his life and his secrets. But now, after hearing this, it felt like I was tangled up in something much darker. The people Shinonso was supposedly involved with, what kind of danger were they capable of? I could still hear Nkechi's voice echoing in my head. "You'll be fighting people who don't play by the rules." Her words haunted me. I had thought I was just fighting for my family, for the truth, but now it felt like I was stepping into a war I wasn't prepared for. But no matter how dangerous this became, I couldn't back down. I couldn't let Shinonso get away with what he'd done to me and to the kids. If he had truly entangled himself with people like that, I'd make sure the world knew exactly who he was. I didn't care how far it would take me, how hard the fight would be. My children needed me, and I had nothing left to lose. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. This time, I didn't just bring my divorce papers. I brought everything Chijioke had found, the contracts, the financial records, the offshore accounts, everything. But I also shared what Nkechi had told me. I wasn't sure if it was enough to go on, but I had to know if I was missing anything important. "You need to be careful, Ifeoma," my lawyer, Mrs. Okeke, said, after looking through the papers. Her brow was furrowed in concern. "This isn't just a simple divorce case anymore. The assets you're trying to claim are not just linked to Shinonso. They're linked to some very dangerous people." I looked at her, trying to understand. "What do you mean by dangerous people? What kind of danger are we talking about?" Mrs. Okeke paused, her eyes narrowing as she pushed her glasses up her nose. "Shinonso's connections run deep. I'm talking about international investors, some not-so-legal business dealings. If you go public with this information, there will be consequences. Not just for him, but for you as well." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I had always known Shinonso was hiding things, but the reality of the situation was much worse than I had imagined. So, what should I do? I asked, feeling a cold chill creep over me. Just let him get away with it? No, she replied quickly. We fight him on your terms. But you need to be prepared. If you want to take this further, it won't just be a battle in the courts. It will be a battle for your life, your safety, and your family's future. I left Mrs. Okeke's office feeling more uncertain than ever. The decision wasn't as simple as I had thought. It wasn't just about revenge or exposing Shinonso anymore. It was about survival. I had to weigh the risks of going forward with this fight, knowing that I could lose everything. That night, as I lay in bed, my thoughts kept racing. What was Shinonso really involved in? What were these so-called dangerous people capable of? Could I really protect my kids if this spiraled out of control? Just then, my phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was a message from Chijioke. They're watching you. Be careful. My heart stopped. What did he mean by that? Who was watching me? I immediately texted him back. What do you mean? Who? His reply came quickly. Shinonso's people. I've been hearing things. They know what you're doing. They know you're making moves. Watch your back. I felt the weight of his words sink in. My own brother was warning me about Shinonso's people, the ones he had been hiding all along. I didn't know if Chijioke was overreacting, but I couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at me. The feeling that this wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This was a full-on war, and I had just stepped into the ring. The next morning I called Chijioke. What exactly do you know about Shinonso's business dealings? About these people he's connected to? He paused for a moment before answering. I'm not sure I can tell you everything, Ifioma, but what I do know is this. Shinonso has connections in high places. People who will do whatever it takes to protect their investments. And you're in the middle of it. I gripped the phone tightly. Are you telling me that if I push this forward, I'm putting myself in danger? Yes, Chijioke replied. But that's your choice. You can walk away and let him win, or you can keep going and face whatever comes next. Just know that this isn't going to be easy. I sat there in silence, trying to digest what he was telling me. I had already come too far to back down now, but the question kept echoing in my mind. How far was I willing to go? Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from a private number. I opened it, my heart racing. It was a picture of my children, and a message. You should think carefully, Ifioma. This could all go away if you stop fighting. I froze, my blood running cold. This was no longer about money. This was no longer about a divorce. This was about something much more dangerous. I had been warned, and now I had to decide if I was willing to risk everything to take Shinonso down. The photograph sent to me that day, the one of my children, stayed with me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their innocent faces, and the message that came with it replayed in my mind. You should think carefully, Ifioma. This could all go away if you stop fighting. I didn't know who sent it, but I knew it came from Shinonso's side. The warning was clear. Back off, or the consequences would be dire. I spent the entire evening pacing around the house, trying to think. Should I keep going? Should I stop everything before it escalated beyond control? The thought of losing my children, of them being hurt in any way, was unbearable. But I knew I couldn't back down. I couldn't let Shinonso or anyone else intimidate me into silence. But the deeper I got into this, the more I realized that I wasn't just fighting Shinonso anymore. I was up against a system, a network of people who operated in shadows, playing dangerous games with far too much power. This wasn't just about money or custody. This was about survival. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my thoughts a tangled mess of fear and determination. Then, a new plan started to form in my mind. If they thought they could control me with threats, they were wrong. I was going to make sure that the whole world knew the truth, no matter the cost. I needed to take this fight public. If Shinonso and his mysterious associates thought they could intimidate me into submission, I was going to show them just how wrong they were. The next morning, I called Chijioke. "I've made a decision," I said, my voice steady. "We're going public with this. No more hiding. I want to expose everything, the offshore accounts, the shady deals, everything. We're taking this fight to the media." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Ifeoma, are you sure?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "Once you do this, there's no turning back. You'll be putting yourself and the kids at risk." "I know the risks," I replied firmly, "but I'm not going to be scared into silence anymore. If I back down now, I'll be letting Shinonso win. And I won't let him get away with this. I won't let him control me any longer." "All right," Chijioke said finally. "We'll do it. I'll get in touch with a few journalists. We'll make sure this gets out there. But you need to be ready for the fallout. It's going to get ugly." "I'm ready," I said, my voice resolute. "We'll do this the right way, and I'll make sure the truth comes to light." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to fight back. That same afternoon, Chijioke connected me with a well-known investigative journalist, Ngozi Adamu. Ngozi had a reputation for taking on powerful figures, and I trusted her to help expose the truth. She was shocked by the details I gave her, but she was equally determined to help. "Ifeoma, this is bigger than we thought," Ngozi said, after reviewing the documents Chijioke had gathered. "Shinonso has a web of connections that goes way beyond business. These people have their hands in everything: politics, law, even criminal enterprises. It's dangerous, but I'll help you get this story out there." I could hear the concern in her voice, but I wasn't about to back down now. If I was going to fight, I was going to fight with everything I had. Over the next few days, Ngozi and her team worked tirelessly, interviewing sources, cross-referencing documents, and preparing the story for publication. Every step felt like a ticking clock. The more we dug into Shinonso's empire, the more I felt the weight of the danger we were walking into. But then, just as we were about to go public with the story, something happened that I didn't expect. One evening, as I was preparing dinner for the kids, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was. It was Shinonso. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his body. His usual cocky, self-assured demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy I hadn't seen in him before. "Ifeoma," he said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." "I don't have anything to say to you," I replied, standing firm. "You made your choices. Now you'll have to face the consequences." "I know I've done terrible things," he said, his voice strained, "but you don't know what you're dealing with. This isn't just about me. It's bigger than you think." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my pulse quickening. This wasn't just an apology. There was something in his voice that made my skin crawl. "You're playing with fire, Ifeoma," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been trying to protect you, to keep you safe, but you won't listen. If you go through with this, you'll be putting your life, your children's lives, in danger. These people, they won't hesitate to take everything from you, and they'll hurt you in ways you can't imagine." I didn't say anything. The fear that had been building in me since the phone call from Chijioke bubbled up again. Shinonso's words were a warning, but they also felt like a threat. "I won't stop," I said, my voice cold. "I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for the truth." Shinonso's face hardened. "Then you'll regret it." With that, he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. Was he trying to scare me? Or was there more to his warning than I realized? One thing was clear. This was no longer just a fight for my marriage or my children's custody. This was a fight for my life. I wasn't going to back down. But now, more than ever, I knew I had to be careful. The storm I had set in motion was about to explode, and I wasn't sure who would come out standing. The days following Shinonso's visit were filled with tension. His words, "You'll regret it," echoed in my mind over and over. But I knew I couldn't back down now. I had come too far. I had made a decision, and there was no turning back. The truth was going to come out no matter the cost. But the fear he had instilled in me lingered, a shadow that followed me everywhere. What if the people he was involved with really were as dangerous as he said? What if my children and I weren't safe? The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I couldn't let it control me. I couldn't let fear be the reason I gave up. Chijioke was still on edge, too. He had been helping me with everything, from securing the documents to organizing my legal defense. But even he seemed worried now. "We have to be careful, Ifeoma," he warned me one evening. "Shinonso's not just trying to intimidate you. He's trying to warn you off. This could get messy." "I know," I said, my voice tight, "but I can't back down. I won't." The following week, Ngozi called me. She had secured an interview with one of Shinonso's former business partners, a man who had broken away from Shinonso's operation after discovering the shady dealings. He was ready to testify, to provide more evidence of what Shinonso had been involved in. "We're moving forward," Ngozi said, her voice firm. "It's time to expose him. The interview's going to be broadcasted tomorrow night. Get ready." I couldn't help the surge of relief that washed over me. This was it. We were finally going public with the story. The truth was about to be laid bare for everyone to see. But the night before the interview aired, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. I received an anonymous message. "Stop the interview, Ifeoma. You don't know who you're dealing with. If you go forward, your life won't be the only thing you lose." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Was this the same group of people Shinonso had warned me about? Were they really watching me? My hands trembled as I placed the phone down. I couldn't let this stop me. Not now. The next day, I made my way to the television station with Chijioke by my side. He was tense, but I could see the resolve in his eyes. We were going to see this through no matter the cost. As I walked into the newsroom, I felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't about making Shinonso pay for his lies. It was about setting things right. It was about my children, about my future, about the truth finally being heard. The interview was set to air live, and I sat there in front of the cameras, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart racing. Shinonso's former business partner, the one who had agreed to testify, was sitting across from me. His name was Peter, and he looked just as nervous as I felt. He knew the gravity of what we were about to do. "Ifeoma, are you ready for this?" Ngozi asked, her voice steady. "This is your moment. Don't hold back." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm ready." The cameras rolled, and the lights in the studio brightened. The world was about to hear the truth about Shinonso, about his lies, about the web of deceit he had woven. I looked into the camera, my face calm but determined. "Today, I'm here to expose a man who has lied to everyone around him. A man who has used his wealth and his power to manipulate and control, not just me, but many others." I began, my voice steady, unwavering. "My name is Ifeoma, and I was married to Shinonso, a man who pretended to be someone he wasn't. But I'm here to set the record straight." The interview went on for hours, and I answered every question with the same strength. I spoke about the offshore accounts, the shady business dealings, the false image Shinonso had worked so hard to create. Peter, Shinonso's former business partner, corroborated everything. He spoke of deals that went sour, of money laundering, of a man who had used others to build his empire while hiding behind a facade of poverty. As the broadcast ended, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had done it. The world now knew the truth. But as the last credits rolled, a sinking feeling hit my stomach. This wasn't over. Shinonso wasn't going to let this go without a fight. And the people he was involved with? I couldn't even begin to imagine what they were capable of. That night, after the broadcast, my phone rang again. This time it was Shinonso. "I hope you're happy," he said, his voice low and filled with venom. "You've just made things 100 times worse for yourself. for your children, for everyone around you. Do your worst, I said, my voice cold. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You should be, he replied before hanging up. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone. The call left me with a sense of unease, but it also solidified something else. I was not going to back down. Shinonso had spent years hiding behind his lies, using people to protect his secrets. But the truth was out now, and there was no going back. I had made my choice, and no matter what happened next, I would fight for my children. I would fight for justice. And if Shinonso or anyone else thought they could intimidate me into silence, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The battle had just begun, and I was ready for whatever came next. The fallout from the interview was swift. Within hours, the media picked up the story, and soon it was everywhere. News outlets, social media, blogs, they were all talking about Shinonso, about his hidden wealth, his false image, his dirty business dealings. The truth was no longer a secret. The man I had once loved, the man I had built my life around, was now exposed for the world to see. But while the public outcry was deafening, the pressure from Shinonso's side was even more intense. The phone calls and messages started coming in the very next day, each one more threatening than the last. You think you've won? One message read. You've just started a war, Ifioma, and we always win. I ignored them. I couldn't afford to be afraid anymore. I had fought too hard, and now the truth was out. Shinonso's empire was crumbling, and there was no stopping it. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. One afternoon, I received a call from my lawyer, Mrs. Okeke. Her voice was serious, which immediately put me on edge. Ifioma, we need to talk, she said. It's about the custody case. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. What's going on? They've filed a counterclaim, she said. Shinonso is accusing you of being unfit to care for the children. He's using the media exposure to paint you as unstable. He's trying to take the kids away from you. I felt my stomach drop. The betrayal from Shinonso was bad enough, but now he was using the very children I fought so hard to protect as pawns in his game. I couldn't let this happen. I wouldn't. Are we ready for this? I asked, my voice tight with determination. We're ready, Mrs. Okeke said. But it's going to be tough. He's bringing everything he can against you. The media, the money, the power. He's going to fight dirty. I don't care, I said. I'm not giving up. The next few days were filled with legal meetings, court filings, and endless preparation. Shinonso was doing everything he could to turn the public against me, using his connections to smear my name. He painted me as an emotional wreck, unstable and unfit to raise our children. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. On the day of the custody hearing, I walked into the courtroom with my head held high. I was ready for the fight of my life. The room was filled with the usual tension that came with legal battles. But today it felt different. This wasn't just a fight over custody. It was a fight for my future, for my dignity, for my children. Shinonso sat across from me, looking as smug as ever. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing control. He had spent years building a web of lies, manipulating everyone around him. And now it was all falling apart. The judge called the court to order, and the hearing began. Shinonso's lawyer made his case, claiming that I was emotionally unstable, using the media coverage against me. They painted a picture of a woman who had lost her mind, a woman who was no longer fit to care for her children. But I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, presenting my side of the story. The truth. I spoke about Shinonso's lies, about his manipulation, about the empire he had built on deceit. I told the judge about the threats I had received, about the danger that was lurking just behind the surface. I showed the court the evidence, the financial records, the business deals, the offshore accounts. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of the room shifting. The judge listened intently, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in Shinonso's eyes. It wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about who would be believed. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control. As the hearing came to a close, the judge asked for a brief recess. I sat there, staring at Shinonso, who was now fidgeting nervously in his seat. The man who had once been so confident, so sure of his power, was now losing it all. When the judge returned, he spoke firmly. I've heard the arguments and I've seen the evidence. I'm ruling in favor of the mother. The children will remain in Ifeoma's custody. But there will be a follow-up evaluation of Shinonso's business dealings, and the court will be looking into the allegations of financial misconduct. I didn't know whether to cry or shout. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of victory. I had won. The children were staying with me, and Shinonso had been exposed for who he really was. But the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Shinonso was a man who didn't give up easily. He was a man who would do anything to keep his power. And I knew that, even though I had won this round, the battle was far from over. As we left the courtroom, Shinonso turned to me, his face a mask of fury. "You think you've won?" he spat. "This isn't over, Ifeoma. You're going to regret this. I'll make sure of it." But I wasn't afraid anymore. The man who had controlled me for so long had no power over me now. I had fought back. I had exposed him for who he really was. And no matter what he did next, I knew I had won. I wasn't just fighting for my children anymore. I was fighting for myself. And I was going to make sure I came out on top. The days after the court hearing felt surreal. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. I had won. The children were staying with me. The judge had seen through Shinonso's lies and manipulation, and I had made it through the storm. But I knew, deep down, that this victory was just the beginning. Shinonso wasn't a man who would take defeat lightly. He had already shown how far he was willing to go to maintain his power, to protect the empire he had built on lies. But I had something he didn't, the truth. And that truth was my shield. The days following the court ruling were filled with more tension, more media coverage, and a constant undercurrent of fear. Shinonso and his team had not given up. They were already preparing for their next move, trying to find any way to overturn the ruling. But no matter what they did, they couldn't erase the damage that had already been done. I didn't hear from Shinonso directly, but the calls kept coming. Anonymous threats, messages warning me to back off, to leave things alone. But I had been through too much to be intimidated by a few empty threats. The people who had tried to silence me were only making me stronger. Then, a week later, I got a call that would change everything. It was from Mrs. Okeke, my lawyer. "Ifeoma," she said, her voice serious. "I have some news. The authorities have just raided one of Shinonso's business properties. They're investigating him for money laundering and financial fraud. Your testimony, the evidence you've provided, is central to the case." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The truth was finally catching up with him. Shinonso's empire, built on lies and deceit, was collapsing faster than he could have ever imagined. "They're taking him down, Ifeoma," Mrs. Okeke continued. "And with this, the custody case is officially closed. There's no way he can challenge your custody anymore." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't just a personal victory anymore. This was a victory for everyone who had been silenced, for everyone who had been manipulated and used by Shinonso. His actions had hurt so many people, and now the truth was coming to light. But as the investigation deepened, more secrets were uncovered. Authorities found ties to corruption, illegal financial transactions, and even deeper connections to some of the most powerful and dangerous people in the country. The web Shinonso had woven was far more intricate than I could have ever imagined. For a moment, I thought about how much this all affected my children. They had seen their father as a hero, as someone they could look up to. How would they cope with this new reality? How could I protect them from the shame and the chaos that were now surrounding our family? But I also realized that I had to protect them from the truth as much as possible. They didn't need to know the details of what their father had done. They needed me to show them love, to help them understand that family wasn't just about blood and loyalty. Family was about trust, about respect. And Shinonso had lost that. As the investigation into his finances continued, Shinonso's reputation was shattered. His business partners turned on him, and the people who once helped him cover his tracks began to testify against him. The authorities were relentless. It wasn't long before Shinonso was arrested on charges of money laundering and embezzlement. The empire he had spent years building was crumbling, piece by piece. And as the news broke, I felt a strange sense of justice. For so long, I had been the one living in the shadows, hiding from the truth, fearing what would happen if it all came out. But now I was free, free from the lies, free from the manipulation. It wasn't over yet, though. Shinonso was facing trial, and the legal battles were far from done. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. As the weeks went on, I focused on rebuilding my life. I took the kids on trips, spent time with them, and helped them adjust to the changes. It wasn't easy, but we were healing. Every day we were a little stronger, a little more at peace with what had happened. Shinonso's trial eventually began, and he was found guilty on multiple charges. His empire, built on lies and deceit, was no more. He lost everything, his businesses, his wealth, his connections. But the most painful loss for him was something money couldn't buy: his family. The court granted me full custody of the kids, and Shinonso's involvement in their lives became limited to supervised visits. It was a victory, but it was bittersweet. I had fought for my children, but I had also fought to protect them from a man who had once been their father. As I sat in the courtroom, listening to the final verdict, I knew this was the end of a long chapter. But it was also the beginning of a new one where I was finally free. Free from the lies, free from the fear, free to move forward with my life and my children's future. I had taken back control. I had won the battle, and now I was ready to live the life I deserved. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, hand in hand with my children, I realized that no matter how dark the past had been, the future was full of hope. I had survived, and I was stronger than ever. Thank you so much for your incredible support. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us. Before we dive into today's heart-wrenching story, please subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Are you tuning in from Lagos, New York, London, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our global family,